Theo has said, "I'll start saving next month 4 times this year." In March, it was because tax season drained his account. In May, it was his sister's wedding. In August, it was a car repair that couldn't wait. In October, it was just that work had been too stressful to deal with anything extra right now. Each reason was completely legitimate. Each one, on its own, sounded like exactly the kind of responsible prioritization a reasonable adult should make. And yet here's the pattern underneath all four. Theo has never once made it to the month where nothing came up. Not because his life is unusually chaotic, because next month was never actually a plan. It was something else entirely, wearing a plan's clothing. By the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why "I'll start next month" is one of the most convincing lies your own brain tells you. Convincing enough that you'll believe it again next month, even after watching this video explain exactly how it works. Let's start with the concept underneath this. When you say, "I'll start saving next month," something interesting happens in your head that has nothing to do with actual saving. You get a small, real hit of virtue, the same kind of satisfaction you'd get from actually doing the thing, except you get it for free, with zero present tense cost. No money leaves your account. No spending gets cut. No discomfort occurs today. You've essentially found a way to feel responsible without being responsible, and your brain, which mostly cares about how things feel right now, has no strong reason to object. This is why the promise feels so good to make. It's not a commitment. It's a psychologically satisfying substitute for one. So let's break down exactly how this trick operates. 5 specific traps your brain sets for you every single time you make this promise. Notice how reasonable each one feels in the moment. Trap 1. The imaginary future self. When you picture future you, who will start saving next month, you're not picturing a real person with real constraints. You're picturing someone calmer, more organized, more disciplined than you currently feel. Someone who has, conveniently, already solved all your current problems. Future Theo doesn't have this month's stress. Future Theo has already dealt with the wedding, the repair, the deadline. The version of you making the promise is essentially handing the hard part off to a fictional, upgraded person who doesn't actually exist yet, and will not magically exist next month either, because next month, you'll just be you again, with new problems standing in for the old ones. Trap 2. The clean slate illusion. There's something deeply appealing about a fresh start. A new month feels like a natural boundary, a reset point, a place where old patterns don't automatically carry forward. But months aren't actually clean slates. They're arbitrary calendar boundaries. Your spending habits, your account balance, your stress level, none of that resets just because a new page turns on the calendar. The clean slate is real on the calendar and completely fictional in your actual financial life, which means you're planning around a boundary that only exists on paper. Trap 3. This is the one with the most research behind it, and it's the one most people have never heard named directly. Present bias, sometimes called hyperbolic discounting. Your brain systematically overvalues immediate costs and undervalues future ones, even when you know rationally that the future cost is just as real. Saving money today has an immediate, felt cost. Less spending money right now. Saving money next month has a cost that your brain barely registers, because next month doesn't feel real yet in the same visceral way this month does. This isn't a character flaw. It's a measurable, well-documented feature of how human brains process time, and it affects nearly everyone, which is exactly why start next month is such a universally convincing promise to make to yourself. Now here's where it gets worse. Because traps 1 through 3 don't operate separately, they reinforce each other in a specific order. The imaginary future self makes the promise feel achievable. The clean slate illusion makes next month feel like a legitimate fresh start. And present bias makes today's version of starting feel unnecessary, since the cost is happening now and the promised action is comfortably parked in a future that doesn't feel urgent yet. Trap 4. The absence of a trigger. This is the practical, structural problem underneath the psychological ones. Next month isn't actually a plan, because a real plan needs a specific trigger, a moment, an action, a cue that actually initiates the behavior. "I'll start saving next month" has no trigger. It's not, "On the 1st of next month I will transfer this exact amount." It's a vague intention floating somewhere in a future 30-day window, with no specific moment assigned to actually execute it. Without a trigger, the intention simply waits for a moment that decides itself. And that moment, by definition, never arrives on its own. Trap 5. Moving goalpost redefinition. Even when someone does attempt to start next month, the definition of starting often quietly shifts to accommodate whatever's happening at the time. Theo's actual pattern wasn't that he forgot his promise. Each month he remembered it clearly, and then reasoned his way out of it in real time, using the same logic that felt airtight every single time. This specific month has an unusual reason, so it makes sense to wait just once more. The reasons were different each time. The pattern of accepting a new reason was identical. Let's put Theo next to Amara, who structured her decisions a little differently, not because she has more willpower than Theo, but because her system was never built around a future promise in the first place. Amara doesn't say, "I'll start saving next month." She never has in the years she's been building her financial habits. When Amara decided to start saving consistently, she didn't pick a future month. She picked the very next paycheck, set an automatic transfer for the day it landed, and let the trigger do the work that willpower was never going to reliably do on its own. There was no next month to negotiate with, because there was no gap between the decision and the action for her present resistance, or a moving goalpost to operate inside. None of this makes Theo weak-willed, or less committed than Amara, or somehow different in character from anyone watching this. Theo is demonstrating a completely normal, well-documented pattern of human psychology around future intentions. This is a structural problem with how the promise itself is built, not a character problem with the person making it, and that distinction matters, because structural problems can be fixed with structural solutions. Willpower, if that were really the missing ingredient, would be a much harder thing to manufacture on demand. So here's what actually closes the gap, whether you've made this promise once or 15 times. The fix isn't a better next month plan. It's removing next month from the equation entirely. First, replace the future date with an immediate trigger. Instead of, "I'll start next month," identify the very next concrete event that will happen regardless your next paycheck, the first of the coming week, the next time you check your account, and attach the action directly to that event, not to a calendar month sitting comfortably in the future. Second, make the action require zero future decision-making. Set up an automatic transfer today for the smallest amount you'd actually follow through on, scheduled for the very next available trigger point. The goal isn't the amount. It's eliminating every future moment where you'd have to decide, again, whether this is finally the right time to start, because that decision point is exactly where next month keeps winning. Third, interrupt the imaginary future self directly. When you notice yourself picturing future me, who will handle this more easily, ask a specific question. What, exactly, will be different about next month that isn't true right now? Usually, the honest answer is, nothing structural has changed, only the calendar page. That question alone often dissolves the illusion enough to act today instead. Fourth, make today's version of starting embarrassingly small. The trap thrives on the idea that starting requires a meaningful amount, a real plan, a serious commitment. Undercut that entirely. Save $5 today. Not because $5 matters financially, but because it eliminates the ability to say, "I'll do it properly next month," since you've already started, imperfectly, today. Fifth, and this is the one that actually prevents the pattern from repeating, treat every future, next month promise as a warning sign rather than a plan. The moment you hear yourself saying it about saving, or anything else you've delayed before, treat that specific sentence as the signal to act in the next 10 minutes, in some small way, rather than as a legitimate scheduling decision. The promise itself becomes the trigger instead of the excuse. Theo's story isn't really about a bad year full of unusual expenses. It's about what happens when a promise is structured in a way that feels like progress while requiring absolutely nothing in the present. And the uncomfortable truth is that most of us have made some version of this exact promise about something more times than we'd like to count. The good news is that closing this gap doesn't require becoming a more disciplined person. It requires removing the specific structural feature, the undefined future trigger that made the promise so easy to make and so easy to quietly break. You don't need to wait for a calmer month, a cleaner slate, or a more organized version of yourself to start. That version of you isn't coming, because the version of you listening to this, right now, already has everything required to begin. The only thing standing between you and starting today is a sentence that was never actually a plan in the first place.